Welcome to Pure Property Investment 101. I'm joined today by Aaron Christie-David. Aaron is the Director of Atelier Wealth, and what we wanted to talk about today, Aaron, is probably a little bit more subject to the rise of both the Sydney and Melbourne property markets over the last 5 years. Sustained capital growth of that 10 to 20% in certain markets year on year has left a lot of owner-occupiers and homeowners in a position where they've got quite a large amount of capital growth and equity ultimately in their properties, and compared to the LVR on their loans on those properties, probably sitting with a pretty large chunk of equity and left with the option now of saying, well, do I continue on the road that we're on, pay off my home loan and then think about what's next? Or do we look at just consistently maybe leveraging a small portion of that equity that's gained to therefore reinvest that into a different market and create additional wealth as opposed to the trajectory that I'm currently on? Mate, I'm sure you probably come across that day in, day out with those questions coming from your clients. Happy for you to share maybe some of the ins and outs that people need to understand.
Yeah, sure thing. We see a lot of clients that have got their owner-occupied property, so their home, like you said, they've got a home loan against it, and they've got a good amount of equity. And what they're saying is, shouldn't we be paying down our home loan as fast as possible before we look to buy an investment property? And I guess you do need to seek financial planning advice or speak to your accountant about your options. But from a broking point of view, what can we do? So what we do is we say, right, continue to pay down your home loan as fast as possible. I guess it comes out of that good debt versus bad debt train of thought. And we say debt is debt. But if you do want to plan for the future, what you can do is tap into the equity. So we can draw out a portion which becomes a deposit for your first investment property. And then what we can do is finance the investment property itself. So that all becomes deductible debt for you as well. What we want to do with every client is work through their cash flow, because ultimately everyone's big question is, we don't want to have to contribute towards this investment property. We want to pay off our home loan as fast as possible, which is right. So what we say is, why don't you get the best of both worlds? So ideally look at a neutrally geared property which takes care of itself. Best case scenario is if it's positively geared and it's actually helping to pay off your home at the same time. And again, that's best case scenario. So what we want to do is work with someone like yourself to say, here's the realistic rental expectation. Here's all the outgoing costs as well that you need to hold this property, account for rate rises, because eventually they will go up as well. That's giving you a fairly defensive and conservative view. And then even if we take a fairly market standard increase on capital growth, what we're left with is someone that's got an asset that sits in the background that should be getting good returns year on year. And in the meantime, you're paying your home loan off as fast as possible.
Like there's, it's really quite a Pandora's box when it comes down to people's position, where they're sitting at that point in time, how long they've got left to pay off their home loan, and ultimately how long they've got left in their working careers as well. You know, we might say that you've got 20 years left to work and earn good incomes in that time, and that might mean well there that you don't necessarily need to focus on just cash flow. You might be able to say, look, we can sustain a small hit because we're going to earn decent income for the next 20 years. And that might mean that you can go chase more a capital growth targeted asset rather than a cash flow asset. But alternatively, if your cash flow is relatively tight and also your time frame might not be as long as far as your time in the working career environment, then you might say, well, we want to get an asset which is going to be self-sustaining, still with capital growth focus, but being able to be cash flow neutral, if not cash flow positive. The key with that is obviously you need to make sure it fits your specific position and your objectives. But then secondly, making sure you release that money in the way that's going to be tax effective and also is going to be the right structures which aren't going to lock you into something that's nasty and you haven't been explained, and all of a sudden now you're very, very much a fixed component of one big bank who's got their paws locked tight into you. And unfortunately there's a lot of people who go down that pathway who probably don't ask the right questions or get the right advice before releasing that equity to invest. Moral of the story, get the right advice early, but really be aware that you probably are sitting on the opportunity. A lot of homeowners in the Sydney and Melbourne market, specifically over the last 5 years, are probably in a position now, if they haven't tapped into equity, to potentially look at releasing some equity to reinvest into the market and get compounded returns on what they're going to be leveraging out of and better their retirement ultimately, as long as that investment is going to be the right strategic property. Guys, again, if you do want to contact Aaron for any reason regarding structures, finances, etc., his team are more than happy to set up some time to have a chat. His details are at the bottom of the screen. Likewise, for our own, our details at the bottom of the screen, and you are more than happy to contact our team and we can set up a meeting to discuss your objectives and strategies. Speak soon. Cheers.